Let's go. Let's talk about this Twitch situation real quick, and then we'll come back to it. Mary, do you want to read the new guidelines? Because we just covered this yesterday.
Yesterday, in case you missed it, Twitch decided to completely overhaul their community guidelines as it regards to sexual content and nudity. And for 24 hours, the streaming platform basically became a cam site on the homepage. It was just full pornography on the platform that was allowed, forms of nudity that are illustrated or not. It was all allowed. And then their CEO, Dan Clancy, decided to immediately reverse course and roll back those changes. Here's his newest post. He said, effective today, we're rolling back the artistic nudity changes. Moving forward, depictions of real or fictional nudity won't be allowed on Twitch, regardless of the medium. This restriction does not apply to mature-rated games. You can find emote-specific standards for nudity and sexual content in the emote guidelines. We aren't making other changes to the updated sexual content policy. We're in the process of pushing out updates to our community guidelines that reflect this change. It will take a few days for both this blog and the community guidelines to be translated. While I wish we would have predicted this outcome, part of our job is to make adjustments that serve the community. I apologize for the confusion this update caused. Yes, we could have never predicted that when we allowed porn, there would be porn on the website.
Eric is in ANCAP. Well, what is your take on it? Oh, also, I have to mention something. So every time we have a guest here on the show, we have them sign a fake $100 bill. And I thought there was some irony of having an ANCAP signing something from the Federal Reserve
note. Yeah.
I was like, it's almost too good to say. Luckily, it's fake, so he's not putting his signature on an actual Federal Reserve note. But I digress.
We just missed a $20 real quick from Tech. Hey, Brett and Mary, why didn't you tell us you had PCC merch? Also, shout out Eric and the Ripaverse. Alpha Core is a solid comic.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
We have been. We've been
trying.
We've been pushing the merch at the start of the. I feel weird pushing the merch, man. You got to get comfortable doing stuff like that.
Well, your money's gonna be made, man.
It's got to make it. So yeah. So what is your take on this? As somebody who's an
well, look, I have no issues with definitely as an ANCAP, people doing whatever they want to do with their private businesses. So rules is not anything I'm necessarily against, right? But yeah, Twitch, seeing them make the mistake over and over and over, it's intriguing, to say the least. I guess that's the only term, because I don't understand this last bit of, while I wish we could, look, if you couldn't have predicted it, I guess, that spells nothing but incompetence top to bottom with your leadership, and you need to be cleaning house. I don't know what the hell this company is doing. I have no idea what the numbers are in comparison to what's Kick, right? Is the other big one right now.
Kick was, remember, they came in the market and they started dropping large checks to creators to try to get them, and they weren't even exclusive deals, right? They would give XQC a whole crap ton of money to come over there, and he was still allowed to stream on other platforms.
Yeah, so I don't know where the money's been made or how it is, because obviously that's what's going to influence their whatever position it is that they had. That's what it ultimately boils down to. I guess they thought that this just wasn't worth it, so it's worth reverting back.
Well, obviously people are theorizing this is because their advertisers went to them and were like, we're going to pull out of this platform if you don't change it back
I can see that happen. That's probably the only reason why they did it, because that, on the other hand, you're like, the reason why they kind of parade these chicks around is because, well, they make them a lot of money in the same respect. So I guess if you're advertisers, you're probably making more money there. Hell, that's how you subsidize probably this entire platform. If they're the ones that are saying, look, man, we're not really with this, that makes more sense as to why they would turn it around. But again, it still goes back to the original point, like the fact that you couldn't pinpoint that being an issue. Seriously, like if I'm a CEO and I'm like, nobody caught this, like even if you didn't make the decision.
Well, no, they are like hiring these community guidelines consultants. They're in the consultant class that identify as like deer.
Yeah.
And they're prioritizing censoring political speech, not censoring sexual content that is obviously being viewed by the minors on the platform. And there are minors who are streaming on the platform as well. Is that allowed? Are the under 18 users allowed to stream?
I'm not sure.
Because they have been.
Yeah.
And then Bloomberg did this whole report about how there is a, underground PDF file ring on Twitch.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Going into this just chatting section at the very bottom, finding children, and then, getting them to do certain poses and dancing for them and grooming them essentially.
Yeah.
And they did nothing to address that.
Yeah, like so it's a competence thing, right? That's what it goes back to. It's like you're not, to your point, they're not putting people in positions that deserve to be there or should be there, and are going to sort of ensure the growth of your business. I mean, look, Amazon's been one of the big ones, checking these boxes.
Yep.
And bringing people in based on identity and all this goofy stuff, instead of bringing folks in who, I don't know, would figure, hey, with a change of these rules, we're going to incentivize these chicks to do this sort of thing. Again, it just blows my mind. I say this as the CEO of my own company. I would be very upset if there was a decision that was just that obvious, that was made and nobody caught it, right? Because you got to look at it like that, through the layers of approval that had to go through.
That's kind of what you're like. Is it because it gets bogged down in just the immense amount of people involved in this decision making that they just can't see the forest through the trees?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's more of just sheer incompetence, because I don't think, definitely with a policy change, more than likely what's happening is that you have several layers, right? There's several different, be it in the department itself or departments, that have to at least glance at something before it becomes like effectively the new policy or whatever it is. So for someone to throw out a crap idea, this is what I talk about with the mega corporations all the time, and why it blows my mind that some of these goofy storylines get approved. I don't just look at and blame the writer, because I'm like, well, someone had to green light that, right?
Not that, but then also like there's editors that should be checking the product.
Editors, your creative managers, whatever VPs, like nobody looked at that and said, that's a terrible idea.
And a lot of them are disconnected with what the public sentiment is, because they're in their own bubble of sorts. So if you don't have anyone, and I guess maybe this is also just a product of the internet age, right? You get instant feedback right away, and they're not taking advantage of the fact that you could basically, you could ostensibly put your finger on the pulse of what people think about your material right now, but you have to be willing to be harsh with yourself and look at it.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But when there's 9,000 people and all of the blame is dispersed between, like, who loses their job because of this? Did anybody at Twitch lose their
Probably
job
not.
because of
They
this?
should
I
have.
doubt it.
They should have.
But there's nobody that's actually one person that's held accountable.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's either one, incompetence, right, or the people that had enough sense didn't at least have enough power to say no, to stop it from happening.
Yeah.
That's what I look at with some of these goofy decisions that get made in comics. It's not just the writer. I'm like, multiple people had to approve of whatever goofy thing is being done.
I really do think it is one of those things where they're like somebody's like, well, it's not my problem. If it goes bad, it's not my problem. I've got my job. I've got my...
Well, I think this is why it's important, and why I think a Marvel and a DC would be so better off in the hands of someone that was actually not only connected to the industry, but it's this thing called incentive, right? This is human nature or human action, whatever it is that you want to call it. And that when, like, for example, with me being so rooted and basically being the EIC of Rippaverse, right? I feel everything, right? So every decision that gets made, I have to feel it. I'm scanning through it. I have to see it. It has to get approved. So whether we succeed or fail in anything it is that we do, at least I'm aware of it, and I can say that it's on me.
Radical ownership of what happened.
Right. So I'm okay with that. But I'm not thinking like with Warner. I know we talk about Zaslav, like, you know, when Tim Drake turns gay, Zaslav, he ain't got nothing to do with that.
He doesn't know.
He has probably no idea that type of stuff is going, because they're so far disconnected from it. So I do believe that these companies are going to go under before they get better anyway. The best case scenario is going to be that someone that gives a damn, that has a lot of money and is going to be really tapped in and connected, somehow has enough to buy the rights from these companies. But as long as they are attached to these mega corporations, their infrastructure does not allow them to pivot, and it doesn't lend itself any sort of credence to any idea of improvement, because it's a structural sort of issue there.
It does feel like maybe it's just because like when you do like what you do in this world, right, where you're constantly reporting on news stories and you're following what these companies do, it can be a little bit blackpilling because it feels like nothing changes because you're so connected to the cycle, right? You're not just checking on a story now and then checking back 6 months later. Like, you look at what happens with Twitch and you're like, that's at least a little bit of a change right off the bat, but the company's going to still ride the line. They're still going to promote these streamers, and you're still going to get the constant argument back and forth as to whether this type of content should be on the platform anyways. And because nobody is held responsible if things go bad, because the corporation size, like when you say Zaslav and you say Tim Drake, it's not just the fact that he's up here and like the editor is down here. Then there's chief editor, there's associate editor, chief editor,
lead editors.
There's 3 levels of HR managers before you get all the way there, all the way up to the top. It's no wonder nobody, like, that's 10 memos down on his day, and he's not reading that one until 10 p.m. And he's like, I didn't know. He's like, it's Pride Month. I didn't care. I didn't know it was a problem. Like, how do you expect the guy to know, right? And that is a problem with the size of these corporations just being so massive that there's nothing they can do about it. When we talk about Disney changing, I'm like, this is not something that you're going to notice in the next year. It's not something you're probably even going to notice in 2 years. It's like trying to turn the Titanic. The corporation's too large. The DEI structure of a lot of these businesses are so ingrained in the corporate side of things, you're not going to see any of those changes anytime soon. You're not going to see a meritocratic solution in the next 2 to 3 years.
That's what I'm saying. This is the benefit of like the more smaller company, and you can be wildly successful. Rippaverse is an example of that. Make a lot of money while still being connected. I do believe that that's the wave of the future, because if I put out a book that just nobody liked, right? Nobody enjoyed, I get to pivot. Right, like I can say, all right, well, let's just not do that anymore. Yeah. That was a terrible idea. Nobody liked it. They
got to double down.
They have to. Yeah. They absolutely have to. By the time it gets to the guys that matter, like, we're probably 4 or 5 years removed from I think it's trying to steer the Titanic is a great kind of analogy for that. That's really the approach. Like, they can't pivot. They don't have, and this is the advantage of the smaller entities, which is why I'm always screaming at people, look, man, this is your time to go out there and be great and be an alternative. And that is your one advantage, is that you keep your ear to the streets. So you understand what's a good idea versus what's a bad idea. And you can make a lot of money in the process by simply paying attention to what it is that your audience wants, because that's not what they're getting from the mainstream. They're not getting anything close to that. It feels like they're making this stuff out of spite, right? More than anything. And maybe it has been, years in the making, but just the fact that they can't pivot like that is an advantage that alternatives have.
We got a $20 from Nate Garland. Said, glad to hear. Yes, parents should know what their kids watch, but how old were you when you were exposed to adult content? Did your parents know? I believe it was a bad decision. Anyone want to tell me why it was a good one? Well, not here. We don't think it was a good decision.
The argument that I made yesterday was, I said, look, at the end of the day, it's your job as a parent to make sure that you're watching what your kids are taking in far as internet content and stuff like that. And we do as a society want to put the onus onto these companies, but we have a whole generation of kids that are being raised by tablets, and that's a problem too, right?
That two things can be true, right? They can be goofy and maybe a little bit maybe there's harsher terms to describe what it is that they're doing. You want to throw the term predatory, whatever it is. But yeah, to your point, there has to be some sort of accountability and responsibility by these parents who unfortunately don't want to be parents at all. Anyway, they want someone else to raise them, and that's what's going to happen.
Kai Cenat is going to raise the sons.
Well, it is also true, though, that if the advertisers were the reason behind these changes, I mean, isn't that the free market asserting its position?
Oh, yeah,
right?
That's a positive thing.
Which is a positive thing.
That's a positive thing, for sure.
All right, well, I don't expect any corporation to share morals with any person, because corporations don't have morals. Yeah. Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media, and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.